There's a direct connection between good, stable jobs and their availability and our culture, our society, and ultimately the fabric of our country.
You're watching Restoring America, where we shine a light on the fundamental values of this country and all of the reasons why they're worth saving. This week, we're going to talk about the #1 issue in every state and across every demographic in the country, the economy. I'm Kaylee McGee White. Let's get started. Too many Americans feel like they're treading water in this economy, and it's no wonder why. Inflation remains stubbornly high, and it's costing us thousands of dollars more per year in the form of higher prices for everyday goods and higher interest rates for mortgages, credit cards, and other loans. This financial burden is weighing heavily on Americans and is affecting not just their day-to-day decisions, but their overall outlook on this country and what it has to offer. It's no coincidence, for example, that fewer Americans today believe that the American dream is still attainable than ever before. Joining me today to discuss this issue is Senator Marco Rubio, who has talked at length about the importance of strengthening the economy and, through it, the bonds that hold our families and communities together. But before we get to Senator Rubio, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and for more, head to washingtonexaminer.com. With me today is Senator Marco Rubio, who writes about the current economic condition and why it's so important to prioritize economic policy making that meets all Americans' needs, not just Washington's, D.C.'s. Senator, thank you very much for being with us today. You've talked extensively about building up the working class, which, as you know, has been all but left behind by the Biden administration's economic policies. One of the seemingly simple ways that we can build up and restore the working class is by making sure they have access to stable, good-paying jobs. Why is this an important priority for the government, and what does it look like in practice?
Well, the creation of stable, good-paying jobs has to be the top priority, if not one of the top priorities of any economic policy. Ultimately, economic growth is important. The size of our GDP, all these things are relevant and they're critical, but that alone doesn't tell the full story. It has to be economic growth that creates stable and good work for as many people as possible. Jobs are at the core of what makes our country possible, our communities possible, our lives possible. Without good paying jobs, it's tough to build community. It's tough for families to hold together, to even form. And it's hard on our country when millions and millions of people do not feel like they have a dignified work that doesn't just help them pay their bills, but also help them build the lives for themselves and for their future.
We know inflation is eating away at Americans' wallets, and it seems as though everywhere we look, costs are going up. How have the rising costs of housing, food, healthcare, education, and transportation affected working families and their communities?
Well, obviously, inflation is a problem for everyone, but it's particularly hard for working people because it's at the necessities. It's the necessities of life: housing, food, healthcare, education, transportation. These are the necessities of life, and there's where we've seen inflation higher than in any other part of the economy. And what it means is literally this: at the end of the month, you have less money left over. You have less money left over to save. You have less money left over for emergencies. And in some cases, you didn't have enough, and so you're putting it on a credit card. So as I said, inflation's been bad on everyone, but it's been particularly difficult on working families and has made life harder and less affordable. It's created more stress and more strain, and I worry about its impact in the months and years to come.
You've also talked a lot about the connection between the economy and the culture and how building up the economy is key to strengthening the institutions such as the family. Can you talk more about what federal economic policy can do to support our social fabric?
Well, one of the things I always talk about with jobs is that it's not just about economics. We're not just consumers. We live in families. We live in communities. And ultimately, at its most basic level, that's what the country is made up of. The basic building blocks of the country are not the government. It is family and community. That's where we live life. That's where change happens. That's where positive things happen. That's where you can influence people directly. You can't have that without economic policies and an economy that has good paying jobs. There's a direct link between that. You know, when you don't have a community and jobs disappear, everything else falls apart. We see it in the communities that have been hollowed out because a factory or a large employer left. Then at that point, none of the small businesses to hold the community together around, the institutions, whether it's the PTA, the local baseball team and its coaches, all these things just vanish, and it guts the communities. I think it also makes it hard to form family. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you think about it, you know, people, when they make decisions about whether to start a family, how many kids to have, They think about the costs associated with it. And without good, stable jobs, that becomes more difficult. So it places tremendous strains on family. It actually impedes the formation of family, and it's corrosive to community. The best and healthiest communities are ones that have good, paying, stable jobs that allow people both the time and the money to not just enjoy life, but to give back. To give back as volunteers, to give back in community groups, to give back to their families. And that's why there's a direct connection between good, stable jobs and their availability and our culture, our society, and ultimately the fabric of our country.
Thanks for joining us, Senator. This is a very important topic that we're going to keep our eye on. This has been Restoring America. I'm Kaylee McGee White, and for more straight news, conservative views, and exclusive interviews, head to washingtonexaminer.com.